Hi there, nice to have you with me once again. Today's actually is slightly different. I just found this beautiful spot, which I have been by many times before, but I've actually never stopped. So I thought I would do a very quick video here. So I had something very interesting happen probably 2 or 3 weeks ago from the recording of this video, which is later because it's being uploaded later. Anyway, I think you understand what I mean. I had a listener, a viewer rather, that didn't recognize me but recognized my voice. And I was very surprised because it was a listener that I had from apparently 25 years ago. Now, as I mentioned before, I worked in international broadcasting for about 25 to 30 years for various international broadcasters. And it was a listener that I had at Radio Netherlands, which was very odd. Now, to give you a little taste of kind of the work that I have really done since probably the late 1980s, so 1987, 1988. I mean, I started in radio very young. I was the youngest person hired at the Wildemaromp, which is Radio Nederland. I was probably 17 or 18. I started actually working in the archives, which was moving tapes from, well, essentially the archives to the various different producers, went into engineering, and then went into continuity, and then became a producer, and then became a presenter, and so on and so on and so on. I never really applied to do any of this stuff. It just sort of happened. Sadly, a lot of the programs that I did back in the late 80s and early 90s, I didn't keep anything, except for a few clips here and there. So, since this person asked that question, are you so-and-so? I thought, well, okay, I might as well just answer it because I have talked about it before. So here are two of the earliest clips. One was from a program that I did. It was one of the first programs I did after, I should not say after, during the time I was doing continuity. If you don't know what a continuity presenter is, continuity presenter, they still have in some countries, is you're basically in a studio and you, before the top, well, in our case it was before the bottom of the hour, saying what's coming up next, if there's any frequency changes, and that sort of thing. So you have about like 2 minutes, sometimes longer, per hour, which actually always was a lot of fun. But when I was doing the continuity, the head of the English language service said, oh, listen, we want to start a morning program for Europe. Are you interested? And I went, okay. Had no idea what I was going to do. Didn't even do a pilot. And I then hosted the morning program for Europe, which was called Good Morning Europe. That was on medium wave and short wave for about 3.5, 4 years. Every Saturday. It was basically an offbeat music program as well as serious music program. We did interviews and everything else. Anyway, so here are two clips First from Radio Netherlands, from the late 80s, I suspect. After that, I moved to the production department. Did that for a bit. More continuity reading, voiceovers for programs. This will be followed by a clip from when I went to Radio Havana, Cuba. Now, I'll explain about that when I come back.
That was one of my most favorite big band, the Skymasters, one of Holland's best big bands with I'm Old-Fashioned. I can hear the logger alarm going in the background. Coming up next is the Ritz of comedy shows with Beta Wayne as he brings to you an array of a comical journey through the world of comedy with some very interesting things. You know, there's certain albums that Beta plays on his program that, you know, I am a big comedy fan, and there was a time when I used to buy a lot of comedy albums.
Hello, good morning, everyone. Welcome again to another edition of International Report for May 29th, 1993. And the first thing up on our program, I should say, is a look at the newspapers.
This is Radio Havana, Cuba, broadcasting to Europe and the Middle East on 9,830 kilohertz single sideband and 11,630 kilohertz in the 31 and 25 meter bands.
And the last one we just heard was from Radio Havana, Cuba. That was a total accident how I ended up there. I actually took a holiday to Havana, and every place that I would visit, I would always visit the international broadcaster of that country. In that case, it was Radio Havana, Cuba. And it was beautiful weather, and I, as a joke, I said to his name was Jorge Miares, we're still in touch. He's now working at United Nations Radio. Anyway, I said to Jorge Miares, I said, you know, it's very cold in Europe. Are you hiring anybody at the moment? And then lo and behold, I was down there 5 months later. When I was at Radio Havana, Cuba, what you heard right now were the frequency announcements that I used to do. But I also did 3 other programs. Every second Saturday I was reading news. Monday to Friday I was hosting the 2-hour program for the Americas and the 1-hour program for Europe. And then on Sundays I was hosting a program called, what was it called again? Oh, Jazz Plaza, which was a Latin jazz program. Fun place, actually. And as soon as I got there, it was really funny because one day I was in the hallway having a cigarette and speaking to one of the sound engineers, Jose Costa Pupo, he was one of my favorite engineers to work with. And we were speaking in Spanish, and they had no idea that I spoke Spanish. And then lo and behold, I was introduced to another presenter at Radio Havana, Cuba, who worked in the Spanish language service. And I knew his voice for many years because I listened to him on Radio Moscow. His name is Manolo de la Rosa, a very well-known radio and television presenter in Cuba. But he spent 10 years in Moscow working for the Spanish language service of Radio Moscow. And he used to do a communications program on Saturdays. And then once every 2 weeks, I found myself on that program. And then one day in the French language service, Marie-Dominique, who was the head of the French service, found out that I spoke French. And literally, I was then doing stuff in the French service. So my entire time at Radio Havana, Cuba, I was running between English, French, and Spanish. Which was actually it was a lot of fun because sometimes a listener would be listening to the Spanish service and they'd go, wait a sec, it's the same guy that we heard in English. Anyway, yeah. So I did that for 3 years. And then at the time when I was in Cuba, I was also working as a correspondent for Radio Nederland. And I was reporting in Spanish and in English from Havana. Then went back to the Netherlands, did more continuity reading, did some presenting, did some documentary producing. Here's some of that programming as well.
Residents of the city of Nanjing in the East Province of Jiangsu can now say they have something in common with cities like Paris, Montreal, and Tokyo. What is that, you may ask? Well, Nanjing now has its own jazz festival, in line with other festivals around the world and in other cities in China, like Beijing, Shanghai, Ningbo, and many more.
This is the son of PCJ.
This is the happy station, calling everyone of every nation. Everyone goes in the fun, we've got the blues right on the run. Every Sunday at this time we're feeling good, we're feeling fine. Come join the chorus, sing and tap it. Get the happy station habits.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome again to another edition of your program, The Happy Station, from PCJ Radio International. Keith Powell here with you for the next 55 minutes. And as always, well, I'm happy to be here with you, and I hope that you're happy to be here with us. Now, there's actually a few things that I want to get to on today's program, because it is December, and this is the first show for the month of December, and we have a number of special programs coming up this month, and also at the beginning of January. In fact, some of the programs begin in 2012, I should say, and end in 2013. Now, for those who are regular listeners to the program, you probably already know what I'm talking about, but if you don't, stay tuned and I'll tell you a little bit more about that later on in the program. Hello, I'm Keith Parent, and welcome to Focus Asia Pacific. Coming up today, more on the case surrounding the former mayor of Chongqing, Bo Xilai, from our Beijing correspondent. Agriculture ministers from across Asia met to talk about concerns over food price hikes. And thousands of people displaced by floods in Pakistan. This is Focus Asia Pacific, putting the focus on the Asia Pacific. First, there was the death of a British...
Radio Netherlands has just been hit with a dramatic budget cut of 70%, going from 46 million euros to 14 million euros. But before we get to that, when did you find out that the Radio Netherlands budget would be reduced? Was this before the general election last year, or was it right after?
Well, technically right after, because after an election, an administration is put together, which...
Anyway, that's all we have time for on this brief look at a little bit about myself and my background from a listener that I was surprised. He said that I used to listen to you in the 1990s and 2000s, and I was shocked. He'd never seen me. The funny thing is, I knew the name, and I believe if I spend enough time, I probably have one of his letters that he wrote in around that time. Anyway, like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you soon.
We received an email last week from Roger Tidy in London in the UK. Roger, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. It is Tidy, not Tiddy, right? That's a whole other thing. Well, I mean, we have to be...
Keith!
Okay, sorry.
You don't mess with somebody's name, okay? No. Blooper!
Oh.
Oh.
Okay, let me take this again.
So Richard.
Let me take it's Roger. Let me take this again.
Roger, okay. Roger.
He's Rogering today.
How does a person not encourage you?
Oh, okay.
It's impossible.
Okay, let me take that line again.
Stop it! I'll never get through it. You know. Let me have some water. That will help. Okay. Well, Paulette, I have an email here that we got from Roger. Oh, bollocks. Okay. I'm not laughing at the guy's name. I'm just, my own strangeness here is going out of control. Okay. Let's try again.